It was the sort of late spring day in Paris that can fool you into imagining you're already basking in summer. Sunlight pressed in through the stained glass, streaking fragments of red and blue along the wooden pews, flecking the dust that spun lazily above the crowd. On that afternoon, the old church hall on Rue des Trois Freres was full. It isn't often the neighborhood rallies between the battered stone columns these days, except for funerals. But they'd come for me, and the tension was as thick as the sweet scent of wax and old hymnals. I stood at the front, feeling their stares pressing into my back. My mother sat off to the left, beside my brother Lucian, who avoided my gaze as stubbornly as he'd once avoided sunlight. My aunts and cousins were gathered in their usual knot by the side wall. Father Moreau had insisted I speak from the altar, as if any pronouncement, no matter how foolishly conceived, should bear the weight of ancient ritual. I was just 19 then, brittle with hope and too raw to mask my nerves. My voice trembled at first. I told them what I'd been building, how I could show them a future where robots would serve, create, and perhaps even comfort us. I spoke of engineering, of code, of possibility. My heart quickened with every word, faces blank and closed off, even hostile. Someone coughed pointedly. My Uncle Pierre, always first with a biting remark, shifted in his seat. I finished pleading once again, pleading for their understanding or at least their blessing. When the silence broke, it was a thing of violence. Pierre stood up, palms spread wide for everyone to glance at. Robots, he laughed, the sound ringing false across the hallowed nave. Maybe you make a toy, maybe it dances, but no one here eats from dreams, Armand. He scanned the assembly for allies. My daughter gets up before dawn to bake. My son cuts hair 7 days a week. You want magic from metal and wires. His laughter was contagious. A few others joined, nervous at first, then bold. Does this robot make bread too? Someone called from the back. Or wash your mouth out when you speak nonsense. Someone else mimed a stiff mechanical walk, making children giggle and adults snicker. Mother looked down, her fingers white on her purse strap. I felt slapped. Lucian tugged at her arm, shooting me a sharp, weary glance. Don't make it worse, that look said. My cheeks burned. I tried to answer. I know it's hard to accept, but a hornet swarm of jeers cut me off. Father Moreau cleared his throat, summoning his soothing voice. Armand means well, he said, uncertain, but you must also honor the wisdom of your elders. We live in the world as it is, not as we wish. There was finality in that, the heavy kind that bolts a door. The meeting drifted apart. Some offered me tight, patronizing smiles as they left. Others ignored me altogether. When I stepped outside, blinking in the sudden harsh sunlight, the sounds of laughter still echoed in my ears, sharper than bells. After that day, Paris itself seemed to close up. At home, I became an uneasy spectre, a ghost moving between kitchen and bedroom, greeted with sighs, avoided eyes. My father, who had died when I was 15, had left his old tools in the attic. I carried them out one by one, tried to build with them at night. By week's end, I found them back in the attic, reburied by someone else's hands. I didn't stay long. My application to the Polytechnique, always a wild hope, found me that July. By the time the leaves yellowed, I was gone. Polytechnique had its own coldness, another wall to scale. Sometimes I went days without speaking to anyone but my professors. Even there, the idea of building true machines, autonomous, responsive, helpful, marked me as a naif. Most students discussed finance, industry, military contracts. They called my prototypes toys. A few broke one, then laughed when I protested. I learned to eat quickly, to sleep while drafting code, to ignore the loneliness. My resolve sharpened in the forges of exclusion and self-doubt. When I graduated, I took a night shift sweeping the lobby of a tech startup, just for the chance to sleep on the couch near the 3D printers. By then, my mother's letters were short and awkward. Lucian has a girlfriend, we are well. Are you eating? I answered mechanically, never mentioning my frustrations. What saved me in the end wasn't genius, it was a stubborn faith in the slow accumulation of competence. I designed, I failed, I rebuilt. 2 patents came. A company in Amsterdam took a chance on a joint. I packed a suitcase. For years, I lived lightly city to city, Hamburg, Trondheim, Milan. Friendships flickered into being and faded. I seldom told anyone about Paris. But each time I felt the urge to surrender, the memory of the church's laughter kept me standing. If they'd wanted me broken and quiet, they'd failed. I would put my answer in their hands someday, I would wait. 10 years after that afternoon in the church, I received a call from an executive in Shibuya, one of those midnight calls that feel like a disruption, a disturbance of the natural order. She'd seen my work on robotic modularity. Her company wanted to fund an ambitious project, a machine that could learn household needs, adapt, empathize. I was in Tokyo by spring. For months, my hands shook every time I presented a design to the committee. The days of mockery washed back over me. Still, I planted pieces one after another, assembling the stubborn mosaic of my vision. 2 years later, we announced LINA, the living interface for novice assistants. LINA wasn't a mere appliance or automaton. She was compact, unthreatening, sleek as a folded origami crane, and attentive. She could recognize distress in a voice, remember recipes, adapt to pick up fragile glassware for an old woman's arthritis. Testing her was like introducing a friend to a city. Anxieties abounded. The early reviews mixed skepticism and delight. Some critics dismissed her as a gimmick. A few wept on camera when she helped them remember a childhood song. By then, I was numb with exhaustion. I slept most nights on the office futon, dreaming of wild applause or of the hammering quiet inside the Paris church. In spring, an invitation arrived. The community of Rue des Trois Freres, smaller now but persistent, hosted a festival for Easter Monday. Lucian wrote haltingly, "Mother asks if you could come. You have news, I think." For weeks I hesitated. The thought of returning turned my stomach with nerves, but the pull of that old wound was irresistible. I agreed, stipulating only, "May I bring a guest?" So it happened that one soft blue morning, I emerged from the Gare du Nord, suitcase in one hand, a locked flight case trailing behind, and the April breeze showing me the city as if from a new frame. I stayed at a junky rental flat high over Montmartre, the furniture brittle and paint peeling, the air weighted with muggy silence. On Easter Monday, bells rang through the quarter, and the streets filled with children in wrinkled dress shirts, the elderly hobbling out for once. The festival was staged, ironically enough, in that same old church hall, the scent of beeswax unchanged. My palms sweated as I maneuvered my case through the side door. A few pairs of eyes trailed me from the corners of the room. Old women muttered, tracking my passage. Mother saw me first, face drawn but lighter than before. Behind her, Lucian offered a crooked smile. I nodded at them, unwilling to trust my voice. The festival was as it always had been, tables of cheeses, stacks of baguettes, cakes iced in apricot glaze. There were performances, children on violin, an awkward choir, and then the traditional exhibition. This was where gardeners showed their harvest, crafters their carvings or needlework. The attendees murmured through introductions. Then Father Moreau, hair thinner than memory, shuffled up to the dais. "Our next guest," he intoned, "once lived in our midst. He went far afield. But today he brings us something we may struggle to understand, a new creation. Please welcome Armand Lefebvre." Polite applause, a few glances sidelong heavy with memory. Pierre was here, older but no less eager for spectacle. "Let's see what toys he's made now," whispered his wife not quietly enough. I stepped forward, my heart battered against my ribs. For a moment the heavy silence returned, hanging above our heads like an axe. I unlocked the case. As the lid fell open, a hush spread. LINA, folded into travel mode, was hardly more than a sleek silver disc, a ring of LEDs dimly glowing. I knelt beside her and whispered "Bonjour, LINA" in French. The room inhaled. With crisp smoothness, the disc unfurled, rising onto delicate, humming treads. Her plainer face glowed with a gentle blue warmth. She turned to face the crowd, head cocked, eyes animated yet subtle, tracking the motion of curious children. A soft chime sounded. "Bonjour tout le monde," LINA intoned, voice airy but unmistakably kind. "Je m'appelle LINA, merci de m'inviter chez vous." There it was. A flicker of discomfort, then startled laughter, and after a beat, genuine surprise. A little girl no older than 8 reached out uncertainly. LINA glided forward, stopping precisely within arm's reach. "Tu as un joli Reuben," LINA observed. The girl giggled, suddenly emboldened, and patted the robotic shell. Her parents, wide-eyed, hung back. I stood aside, allowing the demonstration to grow on its own. LINA noticed a dropped spoon and, with an effortless flex of her small pincer, picked it up and returned it to the tray. She recognized an old song playing over the speaker and hummed in harmony. When Lucian, skeptical as ever, purposely toppled 2 stacked cups, LINA zipped over and restored them in seconds. Then Pierre, ever the skeptic, barked out, "Can your robot help my wife carry plates to the table then?" he snorted. "Of course, monsieur," I replied, voice calmer than I felt. LINA turned, assessing the situation. With a gesture, her compact arms precise but fluid, she scooped up the plates, balanced them securely, and followed Pierre's wife to the buffet table. The crowd parted, people whispered, then crowded nearer, eyes wide. Children circled LINA, testing her, calling requests. She responded to each with patient precision. Can you say my name? Can you play a song? Do you know who I am? LINA managed each prompt, attentive, never mechanical. Adults eyed one another, first suspicious, then marveling. Mother approached, tentative. Armand, she whispered. Is it really? She held her hand over LINA, not quite touching, but caught in the gravity of the unknown. It's real, Mammon, I murmured, fighting down an ache in my throat. People pressed in around me, neighbors, old classmates, the butcher who once shooed me away from his stall. They looked but didn't speak at first, letting wonder settle. Finally, Pierre, no longer bombastic, uncertain now, placed his hand on my shoulder. It is impressive, Armand, I did not know. I remembered the first time I'd held a circuit in trembling fingers, unsure if it would ever hum with power. That old silence, once heavy, now felt lifted. For hours I answered questions about motors, about code, about where LINA was made, everywhere really, Paris, Tokyo, Amsterdam, all the places I went after I left here. They asked if LINA could help the sick, the elderly. I explained her gentle arms, her voice, the empathy software that learned over months to predict needs. I spoke about partnerships with hospitals, about elder care, about the dignity machines might bring. The afternoon faded, songs, laughter, even a clumsy attempt to teach LINA a folk dance, which she gamely simulated, though not perfectly. At some point, I realized my mother was weeping quietly into her handkerchief, overwhelmed not by my absence, but by my presence. It was when they asked me to sit at the head table that I felt the past give way entirely. I was no longer the foolish dreamer, the object of communal derision. Instead, there was pride, tentative at first, but gaining strength with every story passed around the bread and wine. When I stepped outside at dusk, the air was cool, sweet with chestnut blossoms. Above the rooftops, the sky dimmed into that impossible Parisian indigo. Lucien appeared at my side, awkward as ever. They saw it, Armand, he said, almost a question. I nodded, still numb. They did. He studied me for a time, then smiled, small but genuine. Mammon says you must come home for dinner. Properly this time. I turned back toward the battered church, now glowing with soft light, and listened to the mingled laughter and piano chords floating out into the evening. For the first time in years, the sound did not lacerate me. Return is never quite the undoing of loss, nor the completion of a circle. But as I walked home that night, LINA's case rolling behind me and my mother's arm hooked in mine, I understood. Sometimes silence is broken not by a shout, but by the steady, unstoppable hum of a dream made real.